gun violence continues to be on the rise. Today, I talk one-on-one with Merrill Chapman, the South Carolina State Chapter President for the Brady Campaign, which helps to prevent gun violence, for this edition of Quintin's Close-Ups. And if you haven't already, subscribe to my YouTube channel and like Quintin's Close-Ups on Facebook. Merrill Chapman, welcome to the award-winning Quintin's Close-Ups.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Oh, you're very welcome. I know that obviously you are the president of the South Carolina chapter of the Brady Campaign, which is helping to prevent gun violence here in South Carolina and beyond. Let me ask you this, Merrill. How difficult is that campaign right now with COVID?
Oh, it's very difficult with COVID. I'm not able to be in touch with people across the state like I'd like to be, but we're still getting our work done. You know, it's still about legislating, litigating, and educating, and we can do that with or without COVID.
What are you legislating and educating right now to the people of South Carolina?
Well, let's look at our backyard. We have, in Charleston, we're having street violence, gun violence that's happening all the time. Every day we're having a shooting. And that's something that we need to look at. Are we tracing where the guns are coming from? Are they ghost guns? Are they stolen out of cars? Where are they coming from? That's something that's very important to find out so we can stop. We're not about getting rid of guns. That's not our goal. We are a bipartisan, multi, group that believes in getting rid of guns from the wrong hands. And those are the wrong hands, the people that are shooting each other in downtown Charleston.
And you talk about obviously tracing. What database would you establish right now?
Well, I'd like to see what the police have in their own capacity, because they have tracer capacity now, and I'd like to see what they're doing.
And I'm going to get back to that in just a second, but I know that there are unprecedented increases of obviously gun violence and gun sales due to COVID. Where are those increases here in South Carolina when it comes to gun sales?
All you have to do is drive down Savannah Highway and see a gun shop, and there are people lined up around the corner to get in. It's insane. We have more guns sold in this country with COVID than we've ever had since we've traced gun sales. And we're having more first-time gun buyers since ever before. I'm not sure what the logic is with COVID and people being so afraid. I don't connect the two, but somewhere there's a connection.
Well, let me ask you this, Merrill. How has COVID made a federal background check loophole much more deadlier?
Well, it's deadlier because we've got a lot more guns sold, and we still have the Charleston loophole,
right,
that's out there that we need to close. So, we really want to get assault weapons off the streets. We want to get background checks for all guns sold. We've got to close the Charleston loophole. So, yeah, COVID is hurting us in a way because we've got so many more guns on the streets now.
And how many of those background checks, Merrill, have taken more than just 3 business days?
Oh, I couldn't tell you that. Okay. I don't know.
Okay. And I know, obviously, in the midst of COVID, and you probably heard about this, but domestic violence has been on the rise during the peak of COVID. Let me ask you another complicated question. Where does the boyfriend loophole come in when it comes to domestic violence and COVID?
Well, people are home. People are home all the time. People are without money, without jobs. We've got the stress level is just through the roof right now. So domestic violence is going to go up. And then when we have more guns sold, domestic violence and guns, that's a deadly combination. And it certainly is being combined, and we're seeing it in the numbers.
And I know this might be a redundant question, but what structural inequities have ramped up gun violence right now?
Well, like you just said, we've just talked about, we have all of the stress from being at home and not having jobs, and people, they're cutting unemployment, they're cutting funding left and right. So, there's just so much stress, and kids aren't in school, kids are home all the time. That's enough to stress you out right there. I say in jest, but obviously when the stress goes up, domestic violence goes up, and when we have more guns sold, the domestic violence connects with those guns, and we have higher gun deaths with partners of women.
And speaking of children, were there any increases in unintentional shooting deaths by children from last year to right now?
We don't have the numbers yet from
Okay.
last year to right now, but those numbers should be coming in, and I would assume that there would be, yeah, because there are more guns at home, and we like to educate people in how to store guns safely. That's a very important thing, especially when you have a gun at home. People feel like they're safer with having a gun at home, but my husband explained it to me a while back before I got involved with Brady. We talked about having a gun because I was scared. He traveled all the time, and I was scared about being home by myself. And he said, Merrill, if somebody comes in with a gun and they point it at you, they're going to know how to use it, have used it before, know what they're doing, and not going to think twice about shooting you. Whereas I am, a diehard liberal, can't help that, and I'm going to think twice about shooting someone. It's just in my blood. It's who I am, and so I'm more in danger of having a gun in my own home than I am without it.
And that brings me to another difficult question. Has COVID highlighted the weaknesses in existing gun laws?
Well, I would say so. Absolutely. Okay. Yeah, it's highlighted. COVID has highlighted a lot of the inequities that we've seen. I mean, we just saw on January 6th, people going to the House and ramming in the Senate doors, and going and looking for Nancy Pelosi and the vice president. And so COVID has made everybody a little nutty right now. Yeah.
And let me ask you this too. How do you reduce the imminent risk of lethality through sensible gun laws and a culture of safety?
To ask me that one more time, Quintin.
Yes, ma'am. How do you reduce the imminent risk of lethality through sensible gun laws and a culture of safety?
Well, I think we can be safe without having a gun in the home, and you can be safe with having a gun in the home if you store it properly. So, it's not about not having a gun. It's about the wrong people, guns being in the wrong hands.
And how do you reduce easy access to those weapons?
Well, we've got to have background checks. No question about it. We've got to have background checks on guns sold and closing the Charleston loophole.
And how do you reduce firearm access to teenagers and people who are at risk of harming themselves or others?
Yeah, that's a toughie. I would say that having the laws in place to so that people that have lost a gun, who a gun's been stolen, that they're culpable if they don't report their gun being stolen. I think that's very important because the police are telling us a lot of these guns that the kids are using come from stolen guns. Well, it's hard for me to believe that 1 in 4, of these guns can be traced to stolen. And I'd like to see the stats on that, because you're looking at a $400, $500 piece of equipment, and somebody's leaving that in their car, unchecked and unlocked, and I wouldn't leave a $500 pair of shoes in the back of my car not being locked and secured.
And let me ask you this:
and they're not dangerous.
Okay. And I know this is another big topic too, but what adequate oversight when it comes to marketing and the sales of guns and ammunition would you like to see?
Well, we'd like to see, the background checks. And I'd like to see background checks on all guns sold. Over Christmas, we saw one of the local stores having a little boy putting a toy machine gun on a Christmas tree. I thought that was just insane to be using a child to sell a machine gun, a semi-automatic weapon, at Christmas time. So there are a lot of things that need to be changed.
And how do you engage with the younger kids about really about guns?
Well, you talk to younger people, and you find some younger people that you can help educate and inform, and let them talk to their friends and support the young people in the conversation. So they're having the conversation amongst themselves.
And would you insist on mandatory training and licensing for owners?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, you're trained to drive a car, and you have to prove that you can drive a car. Why wouldn't you be trained for a lethal weapon? Yeah.
And how would you, Merrill, require safe and secure gun storage, as you mentioned earlier?
Yeah, gun storage is really simple. There are locks that the police give out. There are, there are boxes that are more expensive, but that have locks. You should definitely store your ammunition separately than the gun. So it should be a 2-step process. And kids, if you think about it, kids know where their Christmas presents are. I used to go at Christmas time and search through the house and find the Christmas presents and open them up and then very covertly repackage them as if I'd never opened them at all. But so I know where those were, and that kids know where the hidden gun is. You can't hide a gun from your children in the house. They know where stuff is. Kids are smart.
And that brings me to my next question. What are those underlying contributors to gun violence?
Oh gosh, all kind of underlying contributors to the economy. The stress that goes along with the economy, and the availability of guns. Yeah, there's a whole plethora of issues that go along with it.
And I'm right around the corner here from MBRC, and this might be a difficult question, but how can you recognize all of this through public health solutions?
Well, education would be a big part of that. And I think that we have teamed up with some of the doctors at MUSC and helped to educate civilians or citizens on how to store guns properly, how to separate the ammunition from the gun when you store it, what gun violence looks like. What it does to gun violence. When someone is shot and killed by gun violence, it just isn't just the mom that we see on TV crying on the news at night. It's their sister and brother, their father, their uncles, the people they work with, the people they go to school with. It's the doctors that have dealt with them on the table. It's the entire community is touched by gun violence.
And let me ask you just bluntly, what does gun violence look like here in the Lowcountry?
It's pretty tough right now. In North Charleston, the gun violence is per capita equal to what we see in Chicago. So it's not real pretty right now.
Let me ask you another public health question. What gun violence research should the CDC support in your mind?
The CDC should be supporting all kind of gun violence. And in the last administration, we saw that they cut funding to the CDC for all kind of tracing and tracking and training and stuff. So, yeah, everything needs to be brought back to the table. The CDC needs to be tracking where these guns are coming from. They say that it's a steel pipeline because guns are coming from South Carolina and they go to New York and New Jersey for gun violence. So a lot of our guns are going out of the back doors of the gun stores, and not a lot. I will say some of our guns are going out of the back doors of the gun stores and going up to to New York and New Jersey and having gun violence there. And those are trackable. They're traceable.
Traceable, yes, ma'am. And what is that track right now from, say, March 2020 to right now?
I don't know the numbers on that. I do know that it's gotten worse with COVID.
Okay. And I know that obviously you're out in the community all the time educating people about gun violence. What community planning, which includes prevention and intervention, do you support right now?
What community planning do I have to support intervention and all? Well, we want to do the tracer guns to see where the guns that the kids are using, the young people are using for violence, where they're coming from. So we want to get with the police and the mayor's office and work on that. We want to make sure that we know where they're coming from and cut that loophole out right there. And so the young people have a harder time getting a hold of guns, because that's where we're seeing a lot of our violence in the city of Charleston.
And let me stay in the community, because how do you prevent community trauma?
You don't prevent it, you lessen it. And that's one way of lessening it, is keeping guns out of the wrong hands.
Now, obviously, we talked a lot throughout this particular interview about domestic violence and obviously gun violence. What is the linkage between obviously anger and gun violence?
Oh, huge linkage. And even with suicide too, because if you have a gun and you are in the moment of anger or rage or suicidal temptations, you are more likely to kill or with that gun. But if you don't have a gun, if you have a knife or a pill or whatever, it's a whole different story. You have a much bigger chance of living and surviving.
And how many of those people who actually use those pills that are obviously alive right now?
Oh, how many are using the pills?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I don't know how many are using the pills, but we do know that the gun violence, we're seeing 103. What is the number? 103 a year, or people in the United States are being killed a day by gun violence. That's a lot. I mean, it doesn't, when we see COVID and the numbers are going up so high with COVID, right, it kind of daunts the numbers, but this is preventable and we can stop this.
And how do you explore the pathways between gun violence and harmful norms?
Well, I mean, I'm not sure how you mean gun violence and harmful norms. Give me a little more on that, Quintin.
Yes, ma'am. Those harmful normals that we see around here. What can you do with that as far as exploring the pathways?
Well, I would say the pathways are to lessen the availability of the guns. Okay. And we can do things like making sure people are fed and making sure that people have their money for housing and the basics that are needed. So I think that when we look at that, and I think that the president is, and the new administration is looking at that, making sure that that things are happening, that people are being taken care of, that gun violence would hopefully go down in that case.
And let me pivot and go back to Washington. What executive order would you like to see from the Harris and Biden administration?
So many, my goodness. I would like to see assault weapons banned. We did it with, Reagan's the one that lifted the ban. And we saw before that we didn't have all the mass shootings. And so, yeah, that would be a big one to help us in saving lives. And we'd like to see the Charleston loophole, close the loophole on that. Yeah, there are so many things that I would like to see done with assault with this administration that I'd have to write sheets and sheets of paper to list them all.
And you talk a lot about the money and obviously the economy throughout this particular interview. How can you reduce concentrated disadvantage with obviously economic development?
Well, we've got to get, people have to have money to survive. We've got to have good jobs, good economy. That's got to be in place for people to I think it goes hand in hand.
Okay.
And when we have the rage and the despondency of not having our basic needs met, then we are going to see higher gun violence. So, yeah, getting our basic needs met will bring the level down.
Merrill Chapman, thank you so much for your time. And again, welcome to Quintin's Close-Ups.
Thank you, Quintin. I appreciate it.
You're very welcome.